Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today we're going to do another episode of 5 things I wish I knew when I began fishing. This is a series that is all based on me sharing things that I've learned from my experiences of, at this point, probably close to 40 years of fishing that I wish I had known early on in my fishing career because they would have sped up that learning curve. So I'm sharing them with you so that you hopefully do not make the same mistakes I did, and then you can learn from my experiences. This is something that I've done a couple episodes already. This is episode number 3, and they've been very well received. I've gotten very positive feedback to continue doing these, so I will continue as long as you guys like these videos. I mean, if you hit the like button, you leave comments, you subscribe to the channel, those are good ways to tell me that you're enjoying this content. And I do find these to be very valuable. These are quick, simple tips that, if you apply them, will for sure improve your fishing success, or at the very least, prevent you from having bad days on the water because you're not making the mistakes that are going to keep you from catching fish. All right, so let's jump right into this. The first one that I want to talk about has to do with current. Anytime the word current is shared, most people, most anglers out there will think about river fishing. But I'm here to tell you that current is not just all about natural current, where you've got current flow coming from rivers or streams or creeks. Current oftentimes can exist even on natural lakes. And here's a good example. This is one of the first major learning curves for me on this. One of my first years I went to Lake Okeechobee. This is a long time ago at this point. We had really strong winds in the morning. We had south winds. So they were blowing from the south to the north of the lake. And I would say around lunchtime, the wind died down. And as I was fishing, what I recognized is there was water moving. There was current flow that was flowing from north to south. And at first, I was like, this does not make much sense to me. We've got a south wind. Why would there be current going against it? Well, in reality, what happens on large lakes like a Lake Okeechobee is when you have a strong wind, it actually pushes water to the other side of the lake. So, what was happening in the morning on that day is you had water being pushed from the south end of the lake to the north end. So it was actually rising the north end. Well, when that wind died down, and I mean, it didn't lay flat, but it died down significantly. It was probably like a 5 mile an hour wind. We actually had like a backflush happening. So all that water that had been pushed to the north was flowing back to the south because the wind wasn't strong enough to keep it pushed up towards the north end. Well, when I saw that water moving, I quickly took advantage of the fact that I could find some hyacinth clumps and weed beds and weed edges where the current was getting pinched around these objects. And I started catching a lot of fish because the fish were taking advantage of it. So, what I want to tell you is, don't think that current can't be found on a lake when it doesn't have a river connected to it. In fact, you're always going to have some form of current that can be wind driven. So it's up to you guys to take advantage of that. You're looking for your points, you're looking for, like I said before, maybe a weed line, maybe a brake line, any place where water is being funneled through an area is going to have some current, whether that's natural current or wind driven current. But don't ever underestimate the importance of current. And I'm not talking about fast moving current, especially on these natural lakes or wind driven current. A lot of times it's a very slow current. So, you might see particles on the surface being pushed through areas, but that's enough to position the fish because they're waiting for bait fish to come through those areas. If particles are being pushed around, the bait fish are feeding up on that phytoplankton and different things which position the bass. So that's something to keep in mind. One other really good tip with that is, if you see floating debris piling up in certain areas, that's going to show you a lot of times where you have current because that debris is piling up in like an eddy area, just like you'd have on a river. You can do that with leaves that are falling in the fall, grass parts that have floated to the surface, you might see it with. Sometimes if you got strong wind, you actually get like foam lines, bubble lines, so you can see that. And a lot of times that's where those fish are going to be. They're going to be set up right on the edge of where all that floating debris is and where the current is running by on the opposite side. So keep an eye open for that. That's a simple tip that will help you catch a few extra fish. Another tip that I wish somebody had shared with me, and I think about how many fish that I've probably severely injured or potentially killed over the years before I recognized this. Um, it's if you have a gut hooked fish, the best way, as an example, I don't know if this is going to work real well, but as an example, if you've got a fish that swallowed the hook, the best way to remove that hook is to take your needle nose pliers and go under the last gill plate and grab the hook and then twist under the gill plate. And what you can do with that is you get the leverage to pop it out as if the hook was, say, in the lip. If you take your needle nose pliers and go through the mouth and try to turn it and leverage it, what you end up doing is really twisting the hook in the flesh material, and you cause much more harm. So it's way better to use needle nose pliers and go under the gill plate and then just pop the hook free. I wish somebody had told me that when I first started fishing, because, at this point, I mean, I've known the trick for a long time, but it's something where I still see way too many anglers trying to unhook a deep hooked fish through the mouth area. And I just think it's something that would be great for fish care. On a side note, does anybody want to see me turn this into a swim bait? That's my plan with this. I don't know. This was something that I don't know where I got it. I've had it for years and years, and I was getting ready to throw it out, and I'm like, I wonder if I can turn that into a swim bait. So we might try that at some point. So that's the second thing. The third thing has to do with how deep fish go. I don't know why. When I was younger, to me it was like if fish were deeper than 20 feet, that was crazy to me. Like that was just way too deep. And I don't know if that's because, a lot of the books that I read when I was younger talked about fish going down to 20 feet, but not really being much deeper than that. The reality is that bass of all species will go much deeper than 20 feet. It's not uncommon at all to catch fish from 50 feet of water, even deeper. It's just one of those things that, for me, for whatever reason, it was like, I'm not going deeper than that. There's no fish deeper than that. And the reality is there are a lot of fish deeper than that. So don't, I guess what I would say with this one is don't ever feel like you can be too deep for bass. Now, this will take me into my third tip though. You can be too deep for bass if you have a thermocline. So I wish somebody had explained to me what exactly the thermocline was. I had read in books that, yeah, it's where you've got your cold water and warm water meet. You don't have much dissolved oxygen below that. Therefore, the bass don't really go below that. But I wish I had had a very good tutorial about how to identify the thermocline and how it basically acts as like a wall to the fish. And what I mean by that is if you're fishing on a lake and you've got a thermocline, say in 30 feet of water, your bait fish won't be deeper than that. Your bass won't be deeper than that. It's almost like you could draw a line and the fish just don't go below that. But I wish somebody had told me how important that was. Because it's like a wall, the fish will go down to that level but don't go below that level. And therefore, it makes it a very good place to fish. Like that, the level of the thermocline just above that is a really good place to fish because the bait fish are stacked up there, because it's almost like cutting off all the water below that. If you've got points that come and intersect or a hump that intersects with that thermocline, those create very good ambush locations. So I wish somebody had really explained to me the importance of the thermocline, because it would have dramatically sped up my deep water fishing skills. Now, a couple of things I want to point out with the thermocline too. It's not like it's necessarily just shows up magically on your depth finders. You may have to change some of the sensitivity levels. If you've got a very defined thermocline, you'll probably see a fuzzy line that forms. But even if you're not seeing the actual thermocline show up on your graph, you can identify it a lot of times by just looking at where the bait fish are. If you're scanning around and you never see the bait fish below 30 feet, chances are that's because you have a thermocline that's there. But having said all of this, that thermocline will dissipate in cooler water periods And that's when you get a lot of your fish will go much deeper. I mean, fish have been caught out of 100 feet of water before, so it's something to keep in mind. But it is a very, very important piece of the deep water puzzle, in my opinion. Thermoclines act like a bottom wall that prevent the fish from going lower, and you use it almost as an area to pin those fish into certain areas. So any land mass that intersects with the thermocline is an area that you want to fish if you have bait fish in that area. The last thing that I want to talk about here is a little bit of rod repairing. I wish early on somebody had showed me how to replace a rod tip, how to replace a rod guide. I've actually got a rod that I'm working on right here. You can see it. I'm tying one up, so it's something that I love to do, but I haven't been custom building rods now for, I've been doing it I think for the last 7 years or so, but early on, I wish somebody had showed me the importance of changing my guides if they were cracked or replaced. I can think back to a lot of times where I fished with ceramic inserts in my guides that were chipped because I didn't have the money to go replace it, take it to a shop and have it replaced. I just felt like, I would deal with it, and I ended up breaking off a lot of fish because of it. But had somebody showed me how simple it was to replace a guide, how simple it is to replace a rod tip, I would have loved that. Now, building rods is a little bit more complicated, but if you have just the essential down, it's something that, will really make you a better angler and allow you to take better care of your equipment and save you a bunch of money in the long run. So I wish that's something that somebody had showed me early on. But anyways, guys, so that's 5 tips, 5 things that I wish that I had known when I started bass fishing, because honestly, those 5 that I just gave you would have saved me a lot of time on the water in terms of breaking down where fish live and making me a much more efficient angler. So I hope it was helpful. If it was, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have another one of these coming out tomorrow.